Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming along tonight. My name is Arlie, and yes, I am transgender. I know, bad time for it. In addition to being trans, I'm also a PhD student with the University of Tasmania. That one doesn't need applause. But I escaped the cold and moved up here a year ago to finish my PhD at the University of Queensland. And I can tell you that the stereotypes are all wrong, because in many ways you Brisbane people are more progressive than Tasmanians. You're also way less inbred. Now, I'm allowed to say that because I studied genetics. At least, that's what I usually tell people, rather than telling them the truth. The truth that my PhD is in maths. That's the response I'm expecting, because right now I imagine you probably look something like this. That's because whenever I tell people that my PhD is in maths, they get terrified and say something like, oh, I thought maths was so hard at school, or I thought I was never any good at maths, or I thought blue-haired people worked in coffee shops. In my PhD, I'm trying to work out which bits of our DNA control which bits of our body. For example, which bit of our DNA puts so much hair in our butt cracks? At this point, you may be wondering, Arlie, what is a maths PhD student like you working in the world of biology? But mathematicians actually pop up all over the place in biology. Kind of like how hair pops up all over the place in butt cracks. This is especially true in the field of genetics, which looks at DNA and evolution, because it involves a lot of probability maths. And making sense of probability stuff is the job of statisticians like me. And as a statistician, I'm sort of doing the dirty work of genetics. Kind of like how razors do the dirty work of shaving butt crack hair. Understanding the relationship between DNA and the various parts of living organisms is a really important pursuit for all of biology. And this is because the fundamental question in biology is, how do living things work? And what better way to understand how living things work than to just take a peek inside? Specifically, biologists might be interested in questions like, what causes cancer and how can we prevent it in humans? Or how do plants survive droughts? Can we make our food crops drought resistant? Or why are some butt cracks so much hairier than others? Understanding how DNA controls these biological processes can give us a much deeper understanding of their mechanisms. And in turn, that can help us develop targeted solutions to the problems that they pose. Now, biologists have been able to extract the code of DNA for almost 50 years. However, before we can take advantage of the extracted DNA, there's another important step, which is translation. So the DNA molecule is very long and has the double helix shape that you may be familiar with. And the long DNA molecule is like an instruction manual or blueprint for living things. And it's made up of these little repeating elements that are like letters. Now, unfortunately for us, the instruction manual of DNA isn't written in a human language. And so we have to translate it into something that we can interpret. Kind of like how we might translate an ancient scroll written in a forgotten language. In this translation process, we can think of the physical parts of our bodies as being written in a language that we can understand. And we know that the corresponding instructions to make each part of our body are contained somewhere within our DNA. And so all we have to do is work out how they match up. And we can do this by playing a complex game of spot the difference. Like, can you spot the difference between famous 19th century scientist Charles Darwin and equally famous 21st century scientist me? For an example of what this spot the difference process looks like in my research, say that this ancient scroll represents the DNA of an animal, such as the humble guinea pig. If we now took DNA from another animal, we could compare the two sets of DNA and spot any differences between them. In this case, the difference is the hair emoji. Now, because the rest of the DNA is all the same, we know that any difference between the two animals is caused by changing the hair emoji. In this case, perhaps the hair emoji is controlling body hair, giving us the humble naked mole rat. This process of spotting differences in animals and matching those up to differences spotted in DNA is the basic principle of the work that I do. However, rather than having 5 emojis, we instead have billions of letters of DNA. And not only that, but when we look at the two animals, body hair is certainly different, but there's many other things that are different as well. So we're playing multiple games to spot the difference with thousands of bits of DNA, or billions of bits of DNA. And playing spot the difference on that scale is no easy task. And so to do that, with all that data, we require statistics. And that is what a statistician like me is doing working in the world of genetics. Without statisticians like me, biologists would be left with mountains of DNA and mountains of maths, and no idea what any of it means. And it's because of statisticians like me that we can all enjoy the benefit of genetic screening for diseases. And it's because of statisticians like me that we can develop crops that can keep up with changing climates. And it's because of statisticians like me that we can all know that butt crack hair plays the important role of preventing chafing. If you'd like to hear more from a statistician like me, you can find me on Instagram at @scientificarlie. And if you're not a statistician like me, I hope that the next time you hear about DNA and genetics, that you stop and think, what did that inbred blue-haired barista say about butt cracks? Thank you very much.